Traveling in West Siberia can be quite an adventure. While it is fairly easy to cross it from east to west or from west to east by car or by taking a train, to travel from south to north or from north to south, one would have to use whatever means available, and the journey itself might take more than 1 year. However, our goal is not the journey itself. Our goal is to see how the rich and diverse plant and animal kingdoms change as we leave the southern borders of West Siberia and travel north, how they adapt to severe and unsteady climate of the immense West Siberian plain. We shall go from hot steppes of Kazakhstan all the way to the Arctic Ocean, constantly chasing spring. And we shall make plenty of stops along the way. So what exactly is West Siberia? Where is it located? In the minds of many foreigners, Russia and Siberia are one and the same. Never mind foreigners, many Muscovites think that Siberia starts just beyond the city suburbs. Indeed, Siberia is very large and takes up half of all Russian territory. The West Siberian Plain is located in the north of the Eurasian continent. In the south, it borders the dry steppes of Kazakhstan, the Salair Ridge, the Kuznetsk-Alatau, and the Altai Mountains. In the east, it is bordered by the Yenisei River. In the north, it is washed up by the Kara Sea, and in the west, it is propped up by the Ural Mountains. West Siberia is home to the Ob-Irtysh Basin, the most full-flowing river system in all of Eurasia. In its size, West Siberia is comparable to that of all of Western Europe. And so, we are at the very south of the West Siberian Plain. It is springtime here, a celebration of water, a celebration of life itself. Only during springtime, when the melting snow saturates the ground, does the steppe really bloom. The sky above is endless and eternal, just like the steppe itself. And the wind, you can see the wind as it moves the clouds. True to its name, a skylark sings high up in the sky. From time to time, the skylark's song is punctuated by alarmed cries of gophers, the drone and chatter of an endless army of insects, and the concert staged by the frog's grand chamber choir. The steppe landscape is one of the oldest on Earth. It appeared on this continent about 65 million years ago. Immense herds of horses, saiga antelopes, and other large hoofed animals roamed these lands, trampling down and fertilizing the ground. These days, this is the domain of grasses. Some plants hang on to their roots. For example, this Fritillaria ruthanica. In early spring, the roots push the bulb towards the surface. It then sprouts several leaves and a pretty flower. Fritillarias have only 1 week to pollinate and reproduce, after which the flower withers up and the plant's roots drag the bulb back underground, away from the scorching sun. Almost all rhizome plants, such as irises and tulips, look this bright and elegant. Other plants, such as this Colchis sedge, can creep. It sends a thin shoot across the hot sand, which sprouts long, sturdy roots deep down into the dunes. This is a very valuable plant in the fight against shifting desert sands. There are other fascinating plants here as well. These tiny dwarfs survive even in the poorest and saltiest soils. Their main task is to preserve as much of their moisture as possible from evaporation. They have thick, waxy barriers to protect themselves from the hot sun and wind. However, they should not swell up too much either, as their roots are very weak and strong winds can easily tear them off if the plants get too large. Generations of these plants can survive in hot sunshine for centuries, even through the worst droughts. The bobaks, also known as steppe marmots, are not particularly fond of bright sunshine and only appear on the surface in the mornings and evenings. All other time they spend with their family in their cool, cozy burrows. It is early spring morning and Father Marmot is spending it enjoying the warm sunlight with one of his offspring. Marmots are related to squirrels, as strange as it may sound. Both marmots and squirrels are from the Squirridae family, and the bobak marmot is one of the largest ground squirrels you will find, more than half a meter in length and weighing up to 16 kilograms. Bobaks have a short tail, a thick sandy yellow coat with black ripples along the back, and short but powerful legs with large claws for burrowing under the ground. It is often impossible to tell from far off whether the bobak is standing on its paws or sitting comfortably on its behind. Bobaks live in large colonies, sharing their habitats with plenty of neighbors. After spending much of the summer heat in slumber, when autumn approaches they begin visiting each other's burrows, trying to pick the one that would be most suitable for winter hibernation. At last, a large crowd of them gathers in the chosen burrow, where they settle down in 2 layers for the winter. During hibernation, their metabolism slows down and they effectively enter suspended animation. They spend all winter asleep in such tight quarters, keeping warm and slowly using up their fat reserves. Ground squirrels are close relatives of bobaks. Their lifestyles are also very similar. Regular meals twice a day is a requirement, one early in the morning and one late at night. Daytime is reserved for a lengthy siesta in cool underground burrows. There is one significant difference in the way they pass their winters. If marmots sleep in a dense pile all together, the ground squirrels hibernate in their own burrows in small groups of 3 to 4 animals. Small piles of dirt will frequently appear wherever there is a bit of greenery, though catching sight of the creature that makes them can be tricky. It's the mole vole. They can't see very well, but have an excellent sense of smell and big, powerful teeth. Mole voles are in the same family as hamsters and build extensive underground labyrinths of burrows and passages. They do not hibernate, preferring to stock up on food to add to their usual diet of grass roots during wintertime. Steppes are also the home to numerous bird species. Looking at these vast open areas, one would think that there are no spots concealed enough to build a good nest. And yet, the birds manage just fine. This pair of hoopoes nested under a large pile of old flotsam. While the female is on the nest, the male takes care of providing her with food. The harriers made their nest in tall grass. The chicks are getting big, so they will need something more filling than a mouthful of worms. Not that harriers go for such small fry anyway. Marmots may be a bit too big for these birds of prey, but they could easily overpower a ground squirrel. Most often, though, they hunt mice and voles. As far as birds of Siberian steppes go, the demoiselle crane is a true gem in the jewelry box. Elegant white feathers behind the eyes and a silver cap along the top of the head give it a frail and refined appearance. This is the smallest and lightest of all cranes. Translated from French, demoiselle crane means maiden crane. Their nest doesn't much resemble a bird's nest, just two eggs lying on some bare ground. A flock of sheep or a herd can easily destroy it. Demoiselle cranes form pairs for life. Once their chicks hatch, and when autumn finally arrives, they will all head out to India or Pakistan to spend their winter. The green toad would like to get out, but it is just too hot outside. Spadefoot toads, called garlic toads in Russian for their pungent smell, do not dig holes, preferring to bury themselves in soft sand. They are unique among frogs and toads because of their vertical pupil. No other amphibians have pupils like that. This noisy gathering of marsh frogs is an all-boys choir. Except they don't stand on the stage in neat rows, don't perform in unison, and spend most of the time fighting each other for the best singing spot. If too many boys gather in one pond, things get physical. The girls will come to hear this performance even from far away. The strongest and loudest singers get their first pick of wives and have the most offspring. As the weather gets hotter, the steppes fall into a slumber. Soon most living things will shy away. Frogs will bury themselves in pond scum, insects will disappear underground, and marmots and ground squirrels will hide out in their burrows until winter hibernation. Harriers, skylarks, and cranes will raise their young and leave the steppes. Time for us to follow the spring too, which is by now far ahead of us. The forest steppes of West Siberia are most memorable for the endless ponds and lakes of Kurgan and Tyumen regions. These lakes are the most remarkable sight during early spring. Millions of birds gather here upon their return from winter holidays. Some of them are only stopping here for a quick rest, while others have already arrived at their final destination. This colony of pelicans chose this island for their home. These quarters might seem a bit tight, but the birds don't seem to mind sharing them with good neighbors. The colonies of terns and gulls are like a noisy market square of yesteryear. Day and night there are constant fights, quarrels, lovers' spats, arguments, victory songs, groans of the defeated, and cries of angry mobs chasing off outsiders. These 4 pairs of coots are trying to settle a territorial dispute. Folding the wings on the back like a roof is the equivalent of muscle flexing, to convince the opponent that fighting is not in his interest. If that fails to make an impression, things turn physical. An aura of majestic quiet and calm seems to surround the swan's nest on the water. In just a few weeks, this peace and quiet will be just a memory. Multitudes of chicks of all shapes and colors will fill this feathered kindergarten to the brims. These balls of fluff enjoying the bright sunshine are the chicks of return. It is hard to believe that these quiet creatures will soon be adding their voices to the clamor and hubbub of their parents' colony. This stubborn chick of a gull is taking his first swimming lessons, though it should have probably picked an easier spot. These ducklings have just hatched and are now waiting for their brothers and sisters to show up. Our pair of swans did quite well, too. Not all chicks start cute from the beginning. The chicks of cormorants come out of the egg naked and helpless. These chicks with crazy hairstyles belong to a pair of herons. Once they grow up, they will be just as slim and elegant as their parents. The vast spaces of the forest steppes is the preferred habitat of the Siberian roe deer. Its elegant posture and refined manners make him look like nature's aristocracy. This male's turn to duel for the attention of the ladies will come in the fall. By then, his tender horns will harden and become a weapon to reckon with. And speaking of the ladies, here's one with a young offspring, the expected result of last year's festivities. If the roe deer are nature's aristocracy, then beavers are nature's engineers. Doesn't matter how complex the terrain or what the makeup of the soil is, they will be able to figure out the shape, size, and location of the dam to ensure that they have enough water for their needs. Once the dam is in place, others will make use of it too. The muskrat coexists peacefully with the beavers. Even though it doesn't help fell trees or build the dam, the beavers tolerate this freeloader in their midst. The last few geese are off towards the north. We are running late too, so let's catch up with the spring, which has left us far behind again. This is taiga, the thick boreal forest of the Russian north. It looks dim and unwelcoming compared to vast open spaces of the steppes and light birch groves of more southern forests. However, once the sun casts its rays into the dark thickets of firs and pines, this gloomy world is instantly transformed. The air becomes filled with trills and chatter of birds, the murmur of cool forest streams, and the rustle of wind playing with the treetops. The scale of taiga is nothing short of staggering. It occupies a vast territory all the way from Scandinavia to the Pacific Ocean and from the Arctic Circle all the way down to the celestial mountains of Tian Shan. The taiga portion of West Siberia takes up a solid chunk of that territory. This is the evergreen kingdom of firs, pines, larches, and other conifers, which feeds and protects thousands of diverse and unique species. Even before the first meadows are free of snow, deep in the woods one can hear these strange and mysterious sounds. This is the song of a wood grouse. Each year, all nearby males gather at the same courting grounds, where each male has a designated courtship territory. The most attractive spots at each courting ground belong to the alpha cocks. Those are the spots most frequented by females. Other males try to win this alpha territory without losing their old spot, which can be a tricky affair. The males walk among the trees of the courting ground with their tail feathers in an impressive spread and engage in oral arguments with their neighbors. Most often, that is where the encounter ends, and both parties depart peacefully. However, if oral arguments fail, then it is time for some good old physical action. The winner gets the girl. Hedgehogs hibernate during the winter as well and wake up with quite an appetite. Children's books like to portray hedgehogs carrying apples and mushrooms on their backs, but that has no basis in reality. This bundle of prickles is not at all a vegetarian. Hedgehogs eat pretty much anything that they can get their paws on, such as insects, worms, snails, and yes, frogs. Snakes are on the menu too. Due to their effective defense system, hedgehogs often flaunt common sense and act downright brazenly. This was the dog's first ever encounter with a hedgehog. Hopefully he learned a few things. Chipmunks are the forest relatives of marmots and ground squirrels. The English word for chipmunk comes from a native Ojibwe word meaning one who descends the trees headlong. It seems to be the specialty of Old World chipmunks as well. Siberian chipmunks wear a stylish coat with 5 stripes. The local native legend says that they got the stripes from the claws of a bear. That is hard to believe, as the bear's paws are large enough to fit a whole chipmunk between each claw. Chipmunks spend most of their autumn gathering food for the winter, which consists mainly of seeds, grains, and if they are lucky enough to live around Siberian pine trees, then the delicious pine nuts as well. Far from prying eyes, in the crown of a pine tree, we find a family of jays. The male of the family brings home the proverbial bacon. He brought plenty of food for the kids and a tasty morsel for his spouse. Owls are very unique birds. They have round faces with large front-facing eyes, which gives them very human-like features. Their needle-sharp talons, excellent eyesight and hearing, as well as extra soft feathers that allow them to fly nearly noiselessly, make them perfect nighttime predators. Owls do not build their own nests. This great gray owl, which is one of the largest forest owls, occupied an old nest of a goshawk. While the mother owl is away, this common redstart uses the occasion to pilfer some soft down feathers for its own nest. The father comes by to check up on the spouse every now and again. Once the chicks hatch, they require constant feeding. Why didn't the older and bigger chick show any interest in the food? That is simply because it is not quite done with the previous meal. It must first get rid of the undigested fur and bones before there is room for another vole in its stomach, or more precisely, its crop. By now, the chicks are old enough to try venturing out, even if they cannot yet fly. A few days later, there is only one chick left in the nest, though others are still somewhere close by. Here's one who must have fallen down while trying to climb the branches around the nest. The parents continue to protect their young even when they are no longer in the nest. They will successfully drive away most common ground predators, such as a fox or even a wolf. However, for larger or more dangerous predators, they will use a different tactic, such as pretending to be injured in order to present themselves as a more appealing target. If that fails to attract the predator's attention, they will go back to using physical force. This remote Siberian taiga is also home to none other than the rare wild orchid. Well, it is time we once again headed further north, in order to catch up with the ever-advancing spring. We head out into the uncharted territory of endless Siberian swamps and marshes. Traveling across a swamp on foot is hard as well as dangerous. Humans never really liked swamps. In terms of agriculture, there isn't much that grows in them. And in most folk tales, swamps are associated with danger and death. However, it is hard to imagine West Siberia without swamps. Wetlands only comprise 2% of all surface, but nearly half of the West Siberian plain is swamps and marshes. These wetlands contain an incredible amount of fresh water, nearly 500 billion cubic meters. In years with low precipitation, the swamps drain excess water, while in the years with high precipitation they retain it. Because of this, West Siberia knows almost no floods nor droughts. Dwarf birch, Labrador tea, rosemary, cranberry, cloudberry, blueberry, all these plants thrive on Siberian swamps, despite the cold winters and wet soil. Hundreds of bird species call swamps their home. Perhaps the most common wetland birds are the waders. They can be very different in size, in plumage, and in behavioral traits. Their family lives are very different too. Ruffs have very elaborate mating plumage, with bright neck feathers forming a prominent, ruff, which is how the bird got its English name. The males gather at courtship grounds where they perform elaborate dances in hopes of winning the heart of a female. Once the honeymoon is over, they abandon the females, who build the nest and lay the eggs on their own. With Wade pipers, the arrangement is reversed. Once the female is done laying the eggs, she takes off for warmer climates, and the male sits on the nest and takes care of the young. In some other species, the female leaves the first nest for the male and builds a second one for herself. And yet in others, both the male and the female take turns sitting on the nest and raising the young. This wood sandpiper is a fine example of the latter arrangement. So is the whimbrel, which is the largest wader found in West Siberia. Unsteady soil and lack of well-maintained roads are not the only reasons why traveling across West Siberian marshes is an extremely difficult affair. Bug season usually starts on the first warm day of summer. Droning clouds of insects hang low above the swamps. This is called swarming, the flying insect's wedding dance. Mosquito males are strict vegetarians and are quite content to drink the flower nectar. The females are after something a lot more nourishing than that. Females can feed on nectar as well and do not require blood for their own survival, but they do need the extra elements such as proteins and iron found in blood in order to lay the eggs. Just when you wonder if things could get any worse, they do. Just beneath the surface of the water awaits yet another dark legion. They spend all winter growing on these slippery rocks, subsisting on tiny bits of organic matter that happen to float by. Now their time has come. Black flies do not drone around your head the way mosquitoes do. They quietly cover up their victim and crawl until they find bare skin. Then they bite away a small piece and drink the blood that fills the wound. The saliva of most species of black fly contains secretions that act as painkillers and anticoagulants. Be extra careful going to sleep unprotected around Siberian wetlands. It may be the last thing you do. The last to come out are the really painful biters, horseflies. All these biting insects act as a kind of a natural barrier to the humans' continuing encroachment into these pristine lands. Next time you hear that Siberia is one of the most sparsely populated areas on Earth, you'll have a good idea why. Tired, bitten, but not defeated, we continue our trip towards the north, chasing the spring. We are now in the area where taiga meets tundra, just south and north of the Arctic Circle. For 9 long months, everything here stays asleep, covered in thick snow. Finally, in the month of May, the spring arrives. The rivers swell with water from melting snow and break through their icy prisons. Once the rivers are clear of ice, the warm southern waters of the River Ob help bring the temperature up a few degrees, and the forest tundra is transformed. This is the kingdom of larches. Larch forests stretch all the way from Scandinavia to the Okhotsk Sea in the Far East. A country the size of France can fit 5 times inside the total territory covered by Russia's larch forests. The River Ob covers a great distance from south to north. It begins its long journey among the snowy peaks of the Altai Ridge, where it is formed by thousands of small mountain streams and creeks. Once it gets a thorough soaking from the swamps and marshes of Khanty-Mansiysk, the Ob merges with Irtysh, which can easily rival it in size. If you're up for an adventure, you should visit the Ob Delta in late spring. Around that time, it turns into a veritable freshwater sea, as wide as 100 kilometers across in some places. Such abundance of water is a haven for fish. The basin of the River Ob is home to many species of whitefish. There is no other river in the world that can rival Ob when it comes to fish diversity. Broad whitefish, humpback whitefish, Vandas, Pelid, Muksun, Tugun, Omul, and Nelma. These are just some of the species that are fished commercially. Siberian whitefish can be eaten raw. It's tasty and safe. There are no parasites in whitefish that are dangerous to humans. Just west of the Ob River Delta, you will find the stern and majestic mountain ridges, the polar Urals. The Ural Mountains are among the oldest mountain formations on our planet. Several times in the last million years, they were covered under a thick sheet of ice, together with much of the rest of Siberia. The polar Urals are particularly magnificent in late spring, when melting water rushes down its steep slopes in thousands of clear waterfalls. This untouched primordial beauty attracts many thrill seekers, especially those who are eager to try their skills at rafting and canoeing. It is time for us to make one more trip towards the north, this time to the edge of the Earth itself. In our chase after the spring, we have finally reached the northern tip of the West Siberian plain, the Yamal Peninsula. You won't often find tundra this warm and welcoming. When summer is already in full swing at the southern edge of West Siberia, snow is just starting to melt at its northern end, and the tundra is often covered by a cold, damp fog. The main barriers to any life in this austere climate are strong cold winds above ground and the hard, cold permafrost beneath it. Yamal's own existence is entirely due to permafrost, which long ago bound the wet sand like a giant icy shield. Moss and lichens are the undisputed rulers of this land. They are the keepers of permafrost. But this is not just the land of ice and cold, dank fog. The sun does manage to melt the thin layer of soil above the permafrost, and when that happens, the tundra is transformed. Scores of insects wake up from their winter slumber and come out to greet the warm spring sun. Tundra seems to shed its austere appearance and embraces life in all its forms. One after another, we see our good old friends return from their sojourns in the south, the ruffs, the wood sandpipers, the wade pipers, and others who are only found in the tundras of the Russian north. The male and female of the white-fronted geese form pairs for life. There is new life under each bush, branch, and tussock. There is danger everywhere, but those who picked a spot around the nest of the peregrine falcon are safe, even though they are right under the nose of the tundra's fiercest hunter. Peregrine falcons choose places on steep slopes above the ground and will dutifully chase away any other predators that try to approach their nest. Yet they won't touch their neighbors. The falcons hunt only in flight, attacking their prey at breakneck speeds, at over 200 kilometers an hour. During the nesting period, only the male is out hunting. Once he catches something, he swings by the nest to pass it on to his spouse, almost without slowing down. Yamal is the land of lakes. Small and large, together there are more than 500,000 of them. According to the native legend, a long time ago, all land was covered by the icy ocean. Then God sent the diver, and it dived for 7 days, each time bringing up bits of soil in its beak until its eyes went red with strain. Once there was enough dry land, the gods settled them with deer and people. The diver rarely leaves the water and looks very awkward on dry land. Very few mammals live here year-round. They have to be able to withstand the bitter cold and dark winters in order to survive. Lemmings are easily the most important tundra mammals. This cute, chubby rodent is the main source of food for most winged and legged predators. As the locals say, plenty of lemmings means plenty of Arctic fox. How do lemmings manage to survive if they are literally surrounded by enemies? They are very good at digging burrows in the moss and snow, and they are even better at having large families. The reindeer are the sole livelihood of the nomadic tribes of the Russian north. Warm and resilient, reindeer hide is used to build their houses, make their clothes, footwear, and even children's cradles. The reindeer are their source of food and the means of transportation. The reindeer is one of the core elements of the northern tribes' unique nomadic culture. They spend their whole year migrating from one spot to another in search of suitable pastures. In the summer, it is the juicy sedge, cotton grass, sorrel, and mushrooms, which is the favorite reindeer treat. We catch them at a time when mothers are still caring for their calves. Domesticated reindeer can reach the age of 25. Nomads can travel as far north as the shores of the Arctic Ocean, but they rarely stay there for very long. Summers are short here, and they must head back south before the winter comes. Chasing the ever-advancing spring, we have finally reached the northernmost tip of the West Siberian plain, where it overlooks the great Arctic Ocean. Spring makes this liberating journey every year, bringing warmth and life to these ice-bound lands. We are glad that we were able to follow it all the way up here and see life in all its forms and all its glory. We may have only seen a tiny bit of it, but what we did see was beautiful.